Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. Last weekend, the top diplomats of South Korea, the United States and Japan declared a united front against North Korea after a rapid-fire series of ballistic missile launches by the regime throughout the month of January. Describing those launches as destabilizing, the diplomats also said North Korea must cease its unlawful activities and instead engage in dialogue. The three sides reiterated their commitment to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and their readiness to resume talks with the North.
However, the regime has continually rebuffed overtures for talks from the Biden administration over the past 12 months. For more on this, we connect to Mark Barry, the associate editor of the International Journal on World Peace. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
So first, I'd like to get your reaction on the Hawaii talks, as well as your thoughts on whether they're likely to move the needle in terms of diplomacy with North Korea.
Well, this was a do-over from last November, when a trilateral meeting of deputy foreign ministers in Washington concluded with a one-person press conference by Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. So there arose a behind-the-scenes dispute between Japan and South Korea over a territorial issue, which led to the appearance of a fractured trilateral alliance. So this time, the three nations gave the outward appearance of unity on North Korea in Honolulu. But internally, I suspect that much time was spent discussing U.S. insistence on greater cooperation among its allies against China, reducing their dependency on Chinese trade, and in particular for South Korea, participation in Quad activities. So internally and outwardly, I think there were two different or divergent tracks going on. And South Korea reportedly offered some new ideas to engage North Korea. And then at a joint press conference, one Korean reporter asked a great series of questions about innovative approaches to the North. But unfortunately, he did not get a clear answer.
Right. A lot of the time what happens in these meetings, what is said privately and what is put out publicly in a statement is often rather different. North Korea has refused to, really, the shutters have come down whenever the Biden administration has tried to engage in talks, or at least set the stage for talks. The North continuing to insist that it won't engage with Washington unless it drops what it calls the US's hostile policies toward the North. What can you tell us in terms of what the North considers to be these, quote, hostile policies? And can you see why the North views them that way?
Well, under President Biden, there was a Treasury designation last month of 6 North Korean citizens to be sanctioned who were involved in procuring materials for missile development. And in December, the designation, there was the designation of the DPRK Minister of Defense, actually for human rights reasons, as well as, believe it or not, an animation studio earning foreign currency, particularly for its offices based in China. So also there's been talk of additional U.S. sanctions and of resumption of regular joint U.S.-ROK military exercises. So that obviously is irksome to the North. And finally, I think the nomination of Ambassador Philip Goldberg, a former UN Security Council sanctions enforcer, as ambassador to Seoul, although he has yet to be confirmed, does not assure the North. So North Korea is really saying that the U.S. continues to have little to offer, that the U.S. still wants it to give up its defensive weapons and military secrets for what it regards as vague promises of what the U.S. might do in return. And so the U.S. comes across to the North, I think, worse than it did even 30 years ago, as essentially a superpower making ultimatums, while the North, I think rather realistically, is trying to counterbalance immense Chinese pressure that's largely hidden from view by creating ties with the U.S. But they want to do so accepted as a permanent nuclear power and not as just some junior power or partner.
And Mark, the latest talks happened when most of the international community's attention is focused on Ukraine now. Considering the geopolitical situation, do you think North Korea has slipped further down the Biden administration's list of priorities? And if so, do you expect North Korea to get back on Washington's radar?
Well, first of all, if Ukraine is invaded soon, and I mean this month, that may affect North Korea's overall strategy, depending on the U.S. response. But otherwise, I expect that they'll wait until after the Olympics, then slowly begin to test more missiles, although they'll likely be more of the intermediate range and SLBM or claimed hypersonic variety, and not an ICBM. And this will continue past the March 9th presidential elections in the ROK, past the 110th birthday of Kim Il-sung on April 15th, and maybe until the new ROK president is inaugurated in early May. And by late May, President Biden arrives in Japan for a Quad summit and meeting with Prime Minister Kishida, and he may then fly to Seoul to meet the new ROK president. But I think the North will continue to abstain from nuclear tests because that will turn China and Russia clearly against them and forcing China and Russia to cooperate with the UN Security Council on more stringent sanctions.
And while we're on the subject of China, it's generally seen as the key to resolving the North Korean issue, if it can ever be resolved. But considering how tense the relationship is between Washington and Beijing right now, do you think there's anything South Korea, the US and Japan, even if they come together jointly without any of these side arguments, can do to resolve the situation without Beijing?
Well, as I see it, China was only helpful in the fire and fury days of 2017. Or if you go back to the first decade of this century, to the six-party talks of 2005 to 2008. But China has never been key to solving the nuclear issue because the North strongly distrusts them. Nonetheless, China insists that North Korea has legitimate security concerns and interests and urges tension reduction and negotiation with the North. And Russia, in fact, takes a similar tone, that creating a toxic atmosphere of pressure makes it very unlikely that the North will cooperate. Instead, it will likely redouble its efforts. So in the past, China has used its appearance of influence with North Korea to kind of put the U.S. in China's debt. But in fact, in my view, it has little political influence on the North, and the North Koreans resent Chinese attempts to interfere in the North's foreign relations. So the U.S. is now, in my view, unlikely in these days to ask for Chinese assistance with the North, unlike may have happened in previous administrations.
All right, Mark, we appreciate you making time for us. Thank you, as always, for your insights.
Thank you very much.